Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I have a very special guest today who is coming all the way from Norway, and his name is Torkil Færø, and he is a general practitioner and emergency physician, documentary filmmaker, author, and photographer, and he's had an over 26-year career as a freelance doctor. He's worked all over Norway, had 100,000 consultations, and thus gained a unique picture of the diseases that plague us. He learned that the cause is most often found in the stresses our lifestyle places on our bodies. When his father died at 73, he realized that he had to change his own lifestyle. Being 40 pounds overweight, undertrained, overstressed, underslept, and drinking alcohol daily, he learned that this lifestyle could deprive him of decades. Using wearables, he found a way to track and regulate his nervous system and physiology. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Torkil.
Thank you, Marina, and great to be here talking to you.
Likewise, we were just chatting before about wearables and about your journey. And it's so interesting reading your story and how you came to do this kind of work. And I think it always kind of starts on this personal root cause level, and then we get to decide if we want to change our life, and then also our career can be a huge part of our life. So I'm curious how it all started for you. How did you decide to be a doctor in the first place, and then where in that journey did your father die and then you decided to take charge?
Yeah, I actually had a different way into medicine than most doctors, because what I was interested in was to be able to travel freely around the world, being able to work, with the human body. As a doctor, you can work anywhere in the world. And that was my aim, to live an adventurous life, to be able to work as a doctor. And as a freelance doctor in Norway, it's easy to work part-time. So you can work for 2 weeks or 1 month, and then you can go off traveling or doing whatever you want. So this is what I was after, to be able to live a free and adventurous life. And I was actually doing just that with my family. I was on the way around the world with my own sailing boat, the catamaran, with my family. We had been sailing for 1 year from Greece and all around the Mediterranean and Caribbean. And we were just about to go through the Panama Canal when I got a text message from my father telling that he had jaundice, being yellow from too much bile salts in the blood. And that proved to be cancer. And we just packed down the boat in 48 hours, left the boat by the Panama Canal in the marina, and went home. And 3 months after that, he was dead and buried. And I had been focused on living, an adventurous life, following my dream. But I understood then that, okay, if I don't take more charge of my health, I might die at 73 myself. And I want to live a lot longer than that. And as you probably know, as doctors, we have not really trained in creating health. We are trained in treating disease, diagnosing and categorizing and finding the pills or procedures that fits the disease. We did not learn about sleep, about nutrition, about exercise and alcohol, and all these things that can deprive us of decades. So I just started on my own to do kind of medicine study 2.0 and just educating myself on how can I live longer and healthier. And that proved to be so much new research and information that I had not been aware of, even as a doctor, because as a doctor, you don't really have time to update yourself. You're busy working with people. So yeah, I changed my life around, and somewhere along this, I started to write books. I now have 4 bestsellers, actually 2 now on the bestseller list in Norway at this time. And so just changed my life around. So the most important book, of course, is The Pulse Cure, which is the first book in the world on how to use wearables that tracks your heart rate to improve your life. Because that is what I found during those years after I changed my life, that the heart rate will show the intensity of your life and the stress balance. And there's so much information to get out of these devices that everybody already has. but they don't really know how to use it. So that is the reason behind the success of the Pulse Cure, which is translated into 7 languages and has made my life into being inside of a tornado of attention and media attention and so on.
Yeah, that's amazing. And another thing you shared right before we hit record is that you participated in marathons, including right here where I'm based in New York, whereas I've never I've never been part of any of that stuff, even though I do live right here. It's kind of like, when you're a local, it's kind of crazy. Though some people really do enjoy it and they take the time out. So, it just shows you what a huge turnaround you had from being that 40-pound overweight, overworked doctor to now traveling and also participating in marathons. I'm sure this is not the only one you've done. So how do you attribute, or what do you attribute to, like, the main secret, maybe if you could share, of your ability to go from that version of you to now this version of you who is just so much lighter and so much more fulfilled and is able to go and participate in marathons?
Yeah, that would be not just one thing. I think if it's one thing that is most important, that is quitting alcohol. Because I was doing what was recommended at the time, 2 glasses of wine for men and 1 glass of wine for women every day. That was looked upon as a good thing for your health. Of course, with the wearables, that's the first thing you see. That is terrible for your health. So that even shows the problem that what I thought was best, even giving me better sleep, or so I thought, proves to be the very worst thing you can do for your health. And it becomes very obvious when you start looking at heart rate variability. So that's probably the most important thing. But other than that, it's doing something for your sleep, something for your nutrition, something for exercise, and on something to mitigate the stress levels by breath work and so on. So I think to do a little bit on each of those areas is more important than doing a lot on one area. But certainly quitting alcohol was by far the most important thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think right now it's having a moment in the media again where there's a lot of controversy, where before we had studies showing that there's resveratrol in red wine and there's the Mediterranean diet and they are one of the blue zones. And so this is considered to be one of the things that's a staple in that diet, right? Like relaxing with some friends and enjoying some wine with your dinner, for example. But what we are seeing now with the tracking that we've been able to do, that it affects sleep negatively, that it inflames the body, and that really any amount of alcohol can be detrimental to brain health and nervous system health. So it's very interesting that the wearables were able to pick up on that. And I think one of the great things about modern medicine and technology is that we can sort of prove to ourselves, right, beyond a reasonable doubt with the metrics that we measure, that, hey, this is correlating and this is causation. And we can now finally see with things like CGM as well, like continuous glucose monitoring, you can really see the effect right away. And you don't have to wait a few months, in between starting a therapy or a diet change or a lifestyle change to go get your blood checked and see what is happening. You can really just do it in the moment, which I think is a huge benefit.
Yeah, you can see right away what effect it will have on your body, on your system. And it also is important because what we as doctors usually refer to is big research, with double-blinded research. And this will show you immediately how you respond to something, and how an average of 10,000 people respond to anything is not necessarily important to you. So this is individual medicine at its best. And it's like having a speedometer for your stress levels and health. And you have it on your wrist at all times, so you can always see the intensity of your life. So no, I think it's a big revolution actually in medicine. For me, and I can see that on other people as well, it's as important for stress-related diseases as antibiotics are for the infectious diseases. It can really help you control so many troublesome symptoms of brain fog and muscle aches and joint aches and headaches and so on. So this is a really important thing for the modern day diseases.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we were also talking about how medicine and the medical approaches in different countries are kind of split. We have the conventional allopathic side that is excelling in acute care settings, emergency situations. And, you come from that setting as well. And so we don't want to discount that. That is life-saving and amazing, including surgery and other kinds of interventions. But for the majority of people, what we're plagued with, what the real pandemic is, in my opinion, is the chronic stress-related, lifestyle-related, nervous system-based diseases. And they leak into every area of health because the nervous system, it reacts very quickly, right? It interacts with the environment so quickly. And then it tells us, it tells the body, tells the system what to do, what to feel, how to react. And so when we perceive stress in a certain way, and when we grow accustomed to it, and when everybody else in society is just as stressed as you are, it kind of becomes our normal, but it's really not. So what I'm hearing you say is that wearing these devices really shows you what your own reaction is, what your own interaction and engagement is with the outside world and how things affect you. So I'm curious, could you tell us a little bit more about those metrics? Because you mentioned heart rate variability. So what is that all about? And then I'll also add that the HeartMath Institute is doing some wonderful work in that department. And we're really finding out now too that the heart is not just this organ that pumps things. It's got endocrine function. It's also got a huge electromagnetic field. It's got the heart-brain connection that we also talk about in ancient medicine, like Chinese medicine. We're talking about the Shen and how we want the heart and the mind to really be one. So could you explain a little bit about what to look for when we are wearing wearables? What are the metrics that we want to see?
Yes, the main metric from the monitors is heart rate variability. And that is something I hadn't even heard of from medical school until I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And the heart rate variability is the variation between heartbeats. And you would think that your heart would beat like a metronome and that would be a good heartbeat. But it proves that is not necessarily a good heartbeat. Because what we need is a variation between heartbeats. When we are in the parasympathetic mode, the autonomic nervous system is divided in two parts. The sympathetic survival mode, the fight, flight, and freeze mode that helps us survive, a dangerous situation or to be able to hunt for prey. And we have the parasympathetic rest mode, the recovery mode, where the recovery takes place. And when we are in the recovery mode, then there will be a variation between the heartbeats when we are breathing in or out. So when we are breathing in and the lungs filled with oxygen, the heart rate speeds up a little bit. And when we breathe out and there's less oxygen in the lungs, then the heart rate slows down a little bit, measured in milliseconds. If we are in the stressful mode for whatever reason, whether you have been drinking alcohol, whether you are in the premenstrual period, whether you have been eating something you cannot tolerate like gluten, whether you have been training too much or a host of other different things, then your heart rate will beat at a very steady pace, regardless of you are breathing in or out. And this is how the wearables can see whether you are in the stressed zone or in the relaxed zone. And accumulated throughout the day and night, and compared with millions of users' data and artificial intelligence, it can tell you how you are doing, if your stress balance is sustainable or not, or compatible with health. Because so many of the diseases that we are troubled by is because of too much stress compared to the recovery. And we are often very under-recovered. We haven't had real focus on how to recover. We have been thinking that we can work like machines, going on all the time with little sleep and too much stress, and then just drink some coffee and have some energy drinks, and then you're fine. But that's not the case. So this lifestyle makes us sick from many diseases. So this is something that can help us to find the stress balance by showing us where the stress balance is. Because it's as you're saying, when we are stressed all the time, we kind of lose contact with the ground, so to speak. We don't know what level we are at.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting because when I first learned about heart rate variability, I too would think that, you know what, the more consistently it beats, the better it is. But what you're explaining makes perfect sense. And it also correlates to the amount of stress and how we interact with that stress and our necessity for, just as much as it's necessary for us to breathe out and slow down the heartbeat in those moments, and again interact with what's actually going on, it's important for us to also have periods of rest, periods of sleep, periods of, going out and forgetting about work, taking a break, right? Because we're not meant to be always on. We need to recharge, and that can take on a variety of different formats for different people, but there are definitely some consistencies across the board as well. So I'm curious, so if somebody does wear these wearables and they notice all of these things about themselves and they start to track, what have you noticed as far as how does that motivate? Does it motivate everybody to change? Does everybody kind of respond the same way? And then what would be your best tips for people to start to reduce that stress load, or at least the perception of stress?
Yes, most people will be very motivated by what they see. It will help them to do the cold bath, for example. It will help them to refrain from that extra glass of alcohol when they see the effect. It will help them to see that, okay, if I eat sweets or candy or chips, in the afternoon while watching Netflix, it is not something that relaxes me, and that will motivate them to make another choice. So, but some people will see that they are too stressed anyway, and they may be demotivated by seeing their stress levels. But it's only a tool that tells you the reality of your stress levels, and it may, for many people, be quite a long way out of this stress level, out of this dysfunctional autonomic nervous system. So for some people, it may take longer than they would wish for. So, but for many people, it's like a gamification of their health, an insight into their physiology that is just interesting. And it's their own life and health that is at stake, not just an avatar in a video game. So it becomes very important. So, yeah, you had another question too. I forgot now.
Yeah, what your top tips would be to start to reduce one's stress levels?
Mm-hmm. It would be to be able to do breath work. So to calm yourself down by breathing slowly, like for example, 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out, that would be a really good way to be able to calm yourself down. Because the most important thing is to be able to stress, but also to de-stress, that you have the control. Because you're supposed to push yourself at times to perform at your best, but you are also supposed to be able to calm yourself down fully. And the breath work is the best way to do that, and to be in this mindfulness state also, to be aware, to be present in the moment. So these things would be very important. Other than that, of course, alcohol, as we have been talking about, it would also be to have a good fitness level. If you don't have a good VO2 max as a sign of a good fitness level, then your daily activities can be too much struggle for you. Just walking up some stairs, or your whole body is struggling to keep the metabolism going. And so many of the devices will tell you your VO2 max, and you will be able to see that, and that an increase in the VO2 max, improved mitochondria and so on, will make it easier for your body to run smoothly. So and prioritizing sleep is also important. That's the way that the body can heal itself. You only had to, make it easy for you to sleep, and the body will do the rest. Make sure that you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep and restorative sleep that you can see on your heart rate monitor. And to do that, you would need to have a dark room and a pretty cool room, not too hot. You would need to wind down the last 1 or 2 hours before you go to bed. You would need to stop eating, maybe have 3 or 4 hours from your last meal until you go to sleep, and these kind of things. So, and these are the strategies that you will learn in the pulse cure. So the pulse cure is mainly, I would say 90% of it would be the best strategies for these different areas of life.
Beautiful. Yeah, I completely agree. And I'll also add that the time that you go to sleep matters. And the earlier you can go to sleep, the more restorative deep sleep you can usually get. And so my heart goes out to night shift workers, because I don't know how to reset my circadian rhythm if I were ever to kind of miss my sleep window. But I want to play devil's advocate for a moment with you, Torkil. What if somebody has resistance to wearing wearables, right? And that could be for different reasons, like what you said about maybe some people are already stressed, so they don't want to add another stressor of kind of like tracking themselves and seeing themselves as maybe failing, right? So that could be a fear. Or maybe it's just an extra thing for them to go and look up, and that just adds time to their already busy day. Or some people are worried about like Bluetooth and other kinds of emissions from these kind of devices. So what would you say to people who might be thinking this?
Yes, we can take the Bluetooth issue first. I think most of these devices will have a flight mode. At least my Oura Ring have it, and my Garmin watch has it. And you will be able to put it into flight mode and just transfer the information whenever you want to, and you can leave the room and let the watch update itself to your phone and so on while you're outside of the room. When it comes to it being stressful for people, probably for some people it would be better not to use it. But to use the strategies in the pulse cure, my editor was very firm about that you didn't have to have a device to make the use of the book. So that the advice that the people with wearables have found useful is, of course, also useful for you, even if you don't have the wearables. It's just another thing that helps you to monitor this. And so many people have found that the monitor shows too much stress, and they have been advised from doctors, or psychologists, to just put the watch away. But that will not solve the problem, unfortunately. It's like having a fever and the doctor tells you, okay, just get rid of the thermometer and you're fine. It will not cure it, right? So I think probably the ones that will see that the stress level is too high are the ones who really need it to avoid getting these diseases. So, but anyway, as I said, they can implement the strategies. But it can be hard because you may be struggling to calm yourself down, and the device could tell you that your problem is eating gluten or milk. And as long as you do that, you will not get rid of this problem. So this is the way the wearables can help you, that you see that whenever you have a meal, including that, your stress level is higher afterwards. So I would say most people would need a wearable of this kind. And the only people who don't really need it, they are the ones that are already have a good stress balance. But how many are in that situation? Maybe 10%, of the population that will not need it. All the rest of us, I haven't met anybody starting to use the wearables that have not made use of it and found out something that they have been able to solve, and they feel they have more energy and less symptoms afterwards. So I think maybe 5%, every good medicine has some side effects. So I would regard maybe 5% would be better off not using this. They will be too stressed anyway, and it is no way that it could help them. But I would say for 90% of people, it's a really useful thing.
Yeah, I think it's like that saying, if you don't have time to meditate, then you have to do it twice as much. So like if you don't think you need it, maybe you actually will be the one who benefits the most potentially from looking at those patterns. And I think it's like sometimes easier to think that we can sweep it under the rug and don't look at it. It's like that avoidance pattern. And then you won't have to deal with it if you don't know about it, right? Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it could be very, very helpful for people that are actually willing to look at those things and maybe do something about them and change those habits and make those conclusions. So could you tell us, how easy it is to go and track? Like, is it a daily thing where you download all the data and you look at it? Or like, what's the frequency with which we should be interacting with these devices? And also, if we were to simplify and maybe just start with one device that would be the biggest bang for your buck, let's say, what would that be?
Yes, you have different choices. You could have a smart ring, like an Aura ring. I have now 3 rings, I'm comparing them. So I have a Samsung Galaxy ring, an Aura ring, and a Norwegian Inspire ring. And there's a host of other rings of this kind. And they will usually give you an estimate in the morning of your available physiological energy and the quality of the last night's sleep. And that could be enough for most people. They will see in the morning, how much energy do I have? Can I push myself hard on the exercise today? Or should I relax more? Should I rather do some breath work? And then you can regulate your day, because that's the most important thing, that you get some information, that it helps you to organize the rest of the day, how you spend your energy. If you are going to make sure that you have a better night's sleep the next night, for example. If you want to really micromanage your stress levels, you would need a Garmin watch. So the Garmin watch is the one that helps you to see at each moment throughout the day. You can get your stress levels, and you can see from the curves, you can see the stress levels throughout the day in a very easy to understand. My mother at 82 uses it and understands her stress levels. So when I'm talking about that, you could see after a meal that your body react to it. It's only Garmin that is able really to micromanage your stress levels like that. And Garmin is also the cheapest option for many. You would probably get some watches, and I'm no affiliations to them. Probably for $250, you would be able to get a good device, really good device. You could also use a Whoop band. It's also an American brand, and the Whoop band does not have. It's a bracelet that you have on your arm. And it does not have a screen, so it's less intrusive into your life, just like a ring. And it will also help you to see in the morning how your recovery score is, and throughout the day it will give you a measurement of the strain that you accumulate throughout the day, and will tell you, okay, now you've reached an ideal point in your strain on this day. And the Whoop band will also give you a weekly report and a monthly report, when you can put in, and every day you will have a journal that you will tell Whoop, from the phone what you have been doing, and they will use that information to give it back to you to see what stresses you and how much and so on. So they all have their different pros and cons. So I would say the Aura ring, the Garmin watch, or the Whoop band, or if you are a Samsung user, maybe the Samsung Galaxy ring. So that would be the main things.
So for example, the Garmin watch, would it like ping you throughout the day if you have it on airplane mode, or would you have to wait until it downloads the data to see what your meal effect was, for example?
Yeah, you would have to wait if you want to have it in the flight mode. Then you would have to wait until they transfer the information, and then you would see from the graphs what has happened throughout the day. But you can also, if you don't want to use a flight mode, and I can always push a button and I can see my stress levels. So my stress levels in the moment is 56, so it's right in the middle. And I have a body battery that is 42. So the body battery is kind of the battery accumulated throughout the day. So so those two numbers of stress in the moment and your stress levels followed, like just like in the gas gauge in your car, You can see how much energy you have left. So those are really, really useful numbers for people.
Yeah, I thank you for putting that in context, because I think many people have the resistance of like not even trying to research that, because it just seems like so daunting to kind of figure all that out. And even though a lot of people understand technology nowadays, even older people, like you were saying, there could be that learning curve resistance, and like we don't know what we don't know, so we again just kind of try not to even think about it and put it off in the corner. And I personally also have some resistance to that, even though my husband does wear it and tracks all that stuff. I'm more like intuitive eating and like going with the flow, and I have other ways to monitor myself too. But I think this could definitely be a great idea to validate what you're feeling and to understand yourself on a deeper level. So thank you so much for walking us through that. And I'm also curious, I mean, it sounded like even before the wearables, from an outside perspective, your life sounded honestly pretty awesome, sailing around with your family and being able to take off time and having a respected profession at the same time. So how has your life changed from like a stress and purpose and fulfillment perspective? And what do you currently spend your time doing?
Yeah, currently I'm most of the time into my books, doing lectures, being on podcasts, uh, living a life as an author, but also as a doctor. I was last week in the north of Norway, working 24/7 for 10 days as a doctor. So I still keep doing everything, but now I have much more energy to spend on this, because I'm not losing energy on useless things like food that I can't tolerate, or alcohol, or not be having exercised and being underslept. So just as you said, I've been working a lot of night watches, and I knew it was uncomfortable, but that is carcinogenic and really dangerous for your health. I did not know. So now I feel I can do a lot more with less strain, because I'm doing the things that I'm talking about in my book. And I know that it can be easy for many people, particularly inside the holistic department, that they think that they can feel this. But that has also been so interesting, because so many of them have been starting to track their system, and they've seen that, oh, there was something more here. Because we're not really equipped from the nature side to be able to feel our stress levels. All our good senses, they are directed towards outward threats. We have excellent eyesight, hearing, taste, and smell, and sense of touch. We can feel, small differences in surfaces and so on. But the sense of our inner stress levels, mediated through the heart rate, has just been unnecessary noise for our system, throughout the millennia. But now we need it, and we don't have that sense. So that is why these wearables is like a substitute for that sense that we never needed to develop. So I still have not heard anybody who has not been surprised by something that they have discovered through the heart rate. So the heart rate, as you said, is so much more than just a pump, and it's not really a pump either. It's the heart seems to be more a regulator than a pump, because we have 60,000 kilometers of arteries and capillaries throughout our body, and it's just not that the heart with its size is not able to push the blood through all that. It's 2.5 times around the world in length. So the heart seems to be a regulator. There are other mechanisms that can help the blood circulate than just the heart. And it has, as you said, electromagnetic properties. But maybe most importantly, it will reveal the state of our body through this heart rate variability. That makes it easy for us to see the load on our system and help us to guide our choices.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that as well. I think when you put it in those terms, it seems like an astronomical distance for the heart to pump all that blood. And it just makes me wonder at the human body, right? And how much we kind of take for granted and what goes on and how our cells are keeping us alive. And a lot of it just kind of goes on beneath the surface and our mind doesn't have to worry about it, right? But then stress is going to come in and make everything worse. So I think this was a wonderful conversation. I am personally intrigued now, and it feels a little bit less daunting and more manageable to go out and get a wearable. And if you had like one big message to share with our audience or other healthcare professionals when it comes to health and wearables and your mission, what would that be?
It would be that we have much more control of our health than we maybe used to think. That by managing our stress levels and optimizing or normalizing our function, we can stay healthy and free of disease for many more years than we previously thought. So taking charge of your health is so important for everyone. And this using wearables is such an aid to accomplish that. So that would be my main message.
Yeah. And how would you imagine that medical systems, healthcare systems can utilize some of this stuff in practice and in conventional models?
Oh, they use it a lot. After the book has come out in Norway, I have counted, and the book in Norway has sold that if we relate it to American numbers, it would have sold 3 million copies. So in Norway, all the general practitioners, more or less, would know the power of this tool, and their patients would come to them expecting them to know about using the body battery system, using the heart rate variability. Of course, it's 2 years since the book was released in Norway, and in the beginning, the doctors did not understand anything and thought that this was useless information. But now, after 2 years, and all the patients expect the doctors to know about this, then the doctors use it very actively as a tool because they can see what has happened between the consultations. Normally, when they come in to your as a patient, you measure their blood pressure, maybe you take a blood test, but what has happened from the 3 months since they were there the last time, you have no clue. But if you ask them to have a look at their phone and you see their numbers, you are able to identify parts of how they're been working, whether they may have had long COVID that will show up. And maybe they can see that they are too much stressed in certain times of the week. And it's such an insight into their function that the good practitioners will use it as a very good source of information on the patient's function.
Wow. Well, congratulations on all your success and influence that you were able to create and all the change that happened as a result, positive change, right? So my question is, how can we extrapolate that to the rest of the world? And maybe we can learn something from Norway and from the way your medical practice is like there, because I don't know if you're familiar with our system or even with other countries, but I see a lot of doctors just so overwhelmed and stressed and overworked, working 70-plus-hour weeks, especially as residents and young doctors, and just so much pressure to perform and not enough resources. So how can we learn from Norway and be better about that?
I'm not sure. It just has to start by people taking charge themselves, I think. That is the way it was done in Norway. So the kind of the doctors have been forced by their patients to relate to this in another way. So and I think that most people with some interest in health and holistic health, they will know more than most doctors in this area. So I think the solution is that your listeners and people in general start educating themselves, or they've already been doing that, on how to create health, which is not so difficult. So sleep better, eat better, exercise, being able to mitigate stress. refraining from alcohol and different ways of using nicotine and so on. So it's also difficult.
Yeah, I love that. And it relates back to what you were talking about as far as individualizing medicine. It's the power of one, N equals one, right? So it starts with you, and you'd be surprised at how much control, like you were saying, you have just over your own health and your relationship to your providers. Or if you're a provider, if you start doing different things in your practice, you're going to have that ripple effect. So,
and I must also say that one of the biggest helps for me promoting the book for me is holistic practitioners, because finally they can see in their patients the effect of their treatment, because often they will not have had any visible results, that they can show as proof. But when their patients see that after the treatment my heart rate variability got better, that has been really helpful. So they have been doing a lot of the promotion for me, the holistic practitioners, I must say.
yeah, validation is so powerful. And sometimes it does help to see it on black and white or to see the metrics. So I love that. I want to thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and all that you've done and all your success. And if you have just one more minute left, I'd love to do a rapid fire round with you.
Cool.
Okay. So question number one, we've kind of talked a lot about this already, but what's the number one thing you can recommend to people who want to change their quality of life right now?
Quit alcohol. That would be my number one. Yeah, absolutely. According to the Whoop band, alcohol is the worst stressor of all. So if you have any symptom, any trouble having enough energy, that would be the most important thing.
Okay, awesome. Question number two, what's a fun fact about yourself or something that many people don't know about you?
Maybe they would not know that I'm a fan of long distance walking, like walking on a long pilgrimage. My dream actually is to walk or go on an electric bike, maybe across the United States. There's a non-motorized trail called the American Discovery Trail. I would love to go on such a long distance journey, or maybe the Pacific Crest Trail or the Appalachian Trail. So that is something maybe a lot of people don't know.
Okay, I have to write that down and look that up. I'm just writing it. All right, you're going to be teaching me about America. All right, and then question three, what's your ideal meal to either make, like something you like to cook or something that you like to eat?
That would be related to the stress level. So if I know that I'm stressed and I need a meal that will not give me stress, that I'm sure will not give me stress, that would be a Caesar salad, or as any kind of chicken salad. So that's what I would go for if I know that I need a low impact meal that still satisfies me. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Torkil, this has been such a pleasure. Could you tell our listeners how they can get in touch and learn more about your work?
Yeah, they could go to thepulsecure.com, where I also have a video explaining this. That's probably easier to see when I show the graphs and explain everything more structured in detail. On Instagram, I'm Dr. Torkil, dr.torkil. Yeah, that is where they would be able to find me. And of course,
All right.
my book is available everywhere on Amazon. The Pulse Cure is also an Audible and an ebook. So you would be able to download it on your iPhone or whatever.
Okay, amazing. We'll have all of that in the show notes. And I want to thank you again. And hopefully we'll see each other soon. Bye.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you.